Here are three stories that caught my attention this week. First one, a post from Alex Stapp on Twitter. He shows the United States spends 6.5 times per pupil what Vietnam spends, and yet Vietnam performs almost as well as the United States on international educational comparisons. What can explain this dynamic? What headwinds could the United States be facing that would account for essentially equal outcomes at 6.5 times the cost? Educational reformers love to trout out poverty as the determiner of all educational data, but Vietnam's internationally normed poverty rate of 22.2%, while the figure is 1.7% for the United States. It's very clear when you talk to progressives and you say, we need to spend more on the military because we want to defend ourselves. They'll often say, well, more military spending doesn't necessarily mean we'll be more safe. In fact, it could provoke enemies and it could have a detrimental effect. So just because I'm against more defense spending doesn't mean I'm necessarily against defense. But when the same thing is applied to housing, healthcare, or schooling, which is sometimes called education, even though there's little overlap, then apparently they are completely blind to it, and the pro science people reject all of the scientific analysis. Second interesting post from Chris Freeman, citing a book from Don Lavoie, says this call for coercive governmental control over the organizational form of firms fundamentally changes the nature of economic democracy from increasing the control and participation in the workplace by workers who want to attain it to forcing workers who may not want to take on the risk, expense, and responsibility involved in managing a firm to do so anyway. After all, there are potentially several advantages to workers who choose to specialize in earning wage income in order to be insulated from the vicissitudes of market competition. There is often an advantage in allowing someone else to be the boss and thereby reducing one's concerns to the fulfillment of a wage contract, letting the management fret about the firm's profit and loss statements. While there is nothing inherently wrong with workers' control or ownership or participation, for many small firms in particular, those organizational forms may prove more efficient. There is also nothing inherently wrong with a voluntary separation of the ownership, management, and employee functions. Imagine all of the things that you like in life. You might think computers, microphones, television shows, if those had first been put up to a democratic vote in how the Big Bang Theory would be written, because there's no reason the consumers are also involved in this. Why should only the employees get a say in how it's run? Just because more people who are completely ignorant on certain topics or how things operate, getting more ignorant people involved doesn't necessarily increase the value of what the outcome will be. If you think of your favorite book, it was probably authored by a single author, maybe with an editor or two, but it doesn't mean that things are inherently better the more people that are involved. Thank heavens when you get on an airplane, they don't first take a vote on how the thing should be flown. It's just the pilot, sometimes the co-pilot, they make all the calls and we reap all the benefits as customers. Way more efficient doing it that way. Final thing, also from Chris Freeman. He's a great account to follow on Twitter at CA Freeman, Freiman. He says, capitalism involves far more cooperation than competition. Think of the number of mutually beneficial transactions you've had today compared to the number of competitions you've been in today. This is important because capitalism is often labeled with a dog eat dog mentality where people are always out to get each other. Yes, as opposed to democracy, you constantly have voters competing for which of their politicians is going to coercively rule over the rest of us. You have politicians constantly slandering each other. Look at how competitive things are between Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump. That's within one party. Forget about how competitive the two parties are, always on very minuscule topics, never anything of significant value. But there's just as much competition in democracy, and at least in capitalist free market competition, you can opt out of associating with bad competitors. So First thing to take away is that competition is not unique to the voluntary sector. And the second thing is there's far more cooperation within the market. So, while it is true that you can say have Olive Garden competing with Red Robin, and they are in a fierce competition, the way that they compete is by first cooperating with people to build the buildings, then cooperating with people to keep the place clean, then cooperating with waiters, then cooperating with people to buy their supplies. And they are all at engaging in mutually beneficial transactions at every level of this. And then once they've put all that investment in, then the real cooperation begins where when you walk in, they want the customers to be happy. They want you to be satisfied. You can some very often send food back that you just don't like the taste or you don't even have a reason, and they will still give you a refund. So the lessons are more education spending doesn't necessarily make you smarter. Second thing, just because more people get to vote on things doesn't necessarily make the product or service better. Finally, competition is not unique to the voluntary sector. And within the voluntary sector, there is far more cooperation and mutually beneficial transactions than any of the dog eat dog mentalities that are constantly pinned on us. Thank you for watching the Libertarian Institute YouTube and Odyssey channel. Check us out at libertarianinstitute.org.